الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah Al-Mujadala, Surah number 58, Surah Al-Mujadala, and with ayah number 11 inshallah. Ayah number 11 from Surah Al-Mujadala. We'll recite from 11 to 13 inshallah. We'll start with the recitation inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا في المجالس فافسحوا فافسحوا يفسح الله لكم وإذا قيل انشزوا فانشزوا يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات والله بما تعملون خبير. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا ناجيتم الرسول إذا ناجيتم الرسول فقدموا بين يدي نجواكم صدقة ذلك خير لكم وأطهر ذلك خير لكم وأطهر فإن لم تجدوا فإن الله غفور رحيم. أأشفقتم أن تقدموا بين يدي نجواكم صدقات أأشفقتم أن تقدموا بين يدي نجواكم صدقات فإذ لم تفعلوا وتاب الله عليكم فأقيموا الصلاة فأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأطيعوا الله ورسوله والله خبير بما تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا تمد إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا في المجالس فافسحوا and again give every letter its right, and if there's a mad normal mad like the واو of الجماعة تفسحوا في المجالس فافسحوا يفسح الله لكم and the حاء with a كسرة يفسح الله لكم وإذا قيل انشزوا This is إخفاء. وإذا قيل انشوا and the sheen has a ضمة. وإذا قيل انشزوا فانشزوا. Give it its normal stretch here, if it's correct to say. Don't skip the sound of the مد الطبيعي ما هو الجمع. يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم إخفاء والذين أوتوا العلم درجات والله بما تعملون خبير. خاء is heavy. والله بما تعملون خبير. And the ra is light when you stop at. يا أيها الذين آمنوا, the same thing with the two mad. إذا ناجيتم الرسول. إذا ناجيتم الرسول, the ra is heavy. فقدموا بين يدي نجواكم صدقة. بين يدي, like that with the سكون الضياء. بين يدي الجيم والسكون قلقلة. بين يدي نجواكم صدقة. The dal is light between two heavy letters, the صاد and the قاف. بين يدي نجواكم صدقة ذلك خير لكم. تنوين after إتلام إدغام without غنة. وأطهر. The hamza is light, ta is heavy and qalqala because it has sukun, and ha is light and ra is heavy. وأطهر وأطهر. فإن لم تجدوا, no غنة because of the lam. فإن لم تجدوا فإن الله, بنون الشدة. فإن الله غفور رحيم. The ha is light. فإن الله غا. The ghin is heavy. فإن الله غفور رحيم. And the Torah becomes one with heavy without a غن. أأشفقتم, make sure to همزة. أأشفق, and the قاف with سكون قلقلة. أأشفقتم أن تقدموا, the نون والسكون after التاء إخفاء. أن تقدموا بين يدي, again يدي, نجواكم صدقات. Here with the plural, so that at the end the ta sound. فإذ لم تفعلوا, if a person continue then it's إخفاء. صدقات فإذ لم تفعلوا, and the ذال is to be said, the lam is فإذ لم تفعلوا وتاب الله عليكم. The ba is light, then you go to لفظ الجلالة Allah heavy. وتاب الله عليكم فأقيموا الصلاة, and the lam is light. فأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأطيعوا الله ورسوله. وأطيعوا الله ورسوله, is heavy. والله خبير بما تعملون. The tanween after إتباع إقلاب, the meme sound. The first ayah, which is ayah number 11, this is a call from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the believers, as it's repeated many times in the surah, and one of the adab, one of the manners to be observed, that the believers are unique at, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. The translation of the ayah, first it says, O you who believe, when you are told to make room in the assemblies, spread out and make room. Allah will give you ample room from His mercy. And when you are told to rise up, or for any other, rise up. When you are told to rise up, rise up. Allah will exalt in degree those of you who believe and those who have been granted knowledge. And Allah is well acquainted with what you do. So this is an ayah that talks about a specific order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the believers to observe this adab, this manners. Which is, again, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O you who believe. So what comes after it, after this, either an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the believers to submit themselves to Allah and to fulfill it, or something that they are forbidden from doing, which includes both. It has, the command has also the warning against the opposite of it. Imam al-Sa'di rahimahullah, he says, هذا تأديب من الله لعباده المؤمنين. This is ta'deeb. This is the noun of the adab. This is the ta'deeb, the adab that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding the believers to be upon, and manners that has to be observed. إذا اجتمعوا في مجلس من مجالس مجتمعاتهم. إذا اجتمعوا, if they get together in مجلس of any of the majalis, any of the gatherings that they get together to observe this etiquette and this manner. He says واحتاج بعضهم أو بعض القادمين عليهم, and some of them, or those who are قادمين, those who are coming to them, للتفسح له في المجلس, للتفسح, and that's the word here. إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا, if you are told تفسحوا, تفسحوا, that means make space, make space, make room, and we'll talk about it إن شاء الله تعالى. للتفسح له في المجلس, فإن من الأدب أن يفسحوا له, from the adab, from the manners, that they يفسحوا, that they would make room for the one that is coming, to make room for everyone, تحصيلا لهذا المقصود, to observe this objective. Before we continue, here this is adab, and there are etiquettes and ahkam related to this, and hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. And these manners should be, of course, observed, and it's an obligation because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called the believers to observe this. إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا, if you are told تفسحوا. So whether you are told to make room, then you should make room, or you make room for one another in the majalis, in the places when people are sitting together. There is a sabab nuzul, or there's a reason why the verse was revealed. And as a rule, that the tafsir of the ayat is much more general than the sabab nuzul. So the ruling applies for all kinds of situations if it applies the same meaning. But the Prophet ﷺ, it was said that it was revealed in the day of a Jumu'ah, and the Prophet ﷺ was in the place of a sufa, where the poor ones are sitting there, and the makan, the place was tight. And the Prophet ﷺ, he used to honor the people of Badr. The people, those who witnessed the battle of Badr, they used to be given more honor. And this is because of their virtue and their, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised them in the Quran, which is one of the manners also that the believers, they learn. That they give honor to those who, among them the elders, the people of knowledge, the things like this, to honor them. So they came, some of them from the people of Badr, it was said that they came late and there was no room for them, so they were standing. And the Prophet ﷺ, it bothered him that they are standing while they are from the people of Badr, so he wanted for them to sit. So no one moved from their place because everybody wants to be close to the Prophet ﷺ, which is an honor that no one should give that away for anything whatsoever. So the Prophet ﷺ, as it said in some of the narrations, he would start removing some people so that other people would take their space. So the hypocrites, and that's why the verses in the midst of the verses that talks about the hypocrites, when some of them, they said this is not justice, why the people are removed when they want to be closer to the Prophet ﷺ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse that instead of removing people from their space, but rather to call people to make space for one another, right? Instead of moving people from their place. And the Prophet ﷺ said in clear hadith that من سبق إلى مجلس أو إلى مكان فهو أحق به أو إلى ما لم يسبق إليه فهو أحق به. Whoever comes first to a spot, then he has the right to it. And he forbade anyone from removing someone from his place to sit in his place. لا يقيم الرجل الرجل من مجلسه. A man should not remove a person or a man from his place, his place where he's sitting. ولكن تفسحوا وتوسعوا. But rather تفسحوا, call people to make space, وتوسعوا, and make space for one another. So what is the majalis here is all kinds of majalis, whether it's in Salatul Jumu'ah, Majlis Ilm, where people are sitting with seeking knowledge, sitting in the masjid, sitting in a social gathering, it doesn't matter, to make space for one another. And therefore there's ahkam and there's rulings with this. But we'll go through the tafsir again. So this is again ta'deeb, this is adab, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching the believers that if they need to make space in their majalis, to make space, because this is what they're supposed to be upon, their hearts are together, and they want to be kind to one another. He says, وَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ بِضَارٍ لِلْجَالِسِ شَيْئًا, without harming the one that is sitting, right? So when you make space for someone else, you're not making it harmful for yourself. Because if a person then, if he makes space to others and he is removed from his space, this is not what is meant. But people to fill in the space, to get closer to one another in a way that it doesn't harm them, so that they are sitting in a very uncomfortable way and things like this. He says, فيحصل مقصود أخيه من غير ضرر يلحقه هو. So what his brother is seeking, he will have this without the harm, without any harm to afflict the one that is giving him space. So whether you see that in the places when things are crowded, like in Masjid al-Haram or Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, it goes both ways. Some people, they want to make it difficult for others, so they would squeeze themselves and they make it very difficult for those who are sitting. And on the other side, some people, they want to sit in a way that they are so relaxed as if they are stretched and things like this when the place is crowded. So you cannot sit the same way when the place is empty. So you have to be considerate of how things are. If there's space, sit in a comfortable way. If there's not enough space, get yourself, together, so that others will sit, and at the same time you're not harmed. You're not having any harm as a result of this. والجزاء من جنس العمل. So the reward is given from the same sort of deed that people do. فإن من فسح, whoever gives the word تفسحوا, is المكان الفسيح is the spacious place. So الفسحة is something spacious. Even they use it for the break when someone has a break. And فسحة من الأمر, you're given spaciousness in time. You're given an opportunity. You were late for something, so the time is tight. So now give a space and time. So it gives that meaning of spaciousness. So يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا. So if you are told تفسحوا, make space. في المجالس فافسحوا. What's going to happen to you? يفسح الله لكم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make spaciousness for you. So you would not lose, you would gain. And when a person, because there's this greed in oneself, every time a person is told make space for others, it doesn't feel from the first instant ease. So when a person knows the reward, and when the people, they understand and they remember this is a call for the believers. So the believers, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you shall believe till he love for his brother what he love for himself. Right? So, and this issue causes lots of times issues in the hearts, and people, they sometimes get angry with each other, especially with the first line or the saf in the salah or things of that nature. So there's certain rulings to observe these types of things, but the point here is, if a person would make space for others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it spacious for him. And as he says, فَإِنَّ مَنْ فَسَّحَ فَسَّحَ اللَّهُ لَهُ وَمَنْ وَسَّعَ لِأَخِيهِ وَسَّعَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. So you make space for your brother, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make space for you. And this is in the dunya and in the hereafter. Whether it's spaciousness in matters of rizq, in provisions, in matters of ease, to have ease, to be relieved from the tightness of one's heart, tightness in physical beings, because it's as the ayah says, يفسح الله لكم. Where and how and what, it's left open. Right? So your action, إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا في المجالس, is tied to the majalis. The reward is not tied to a specific place or a specific time. It's mentioned like this in the absolute sense. So that means in anything that you need space in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make space for you. Whether it's something physical, whether it's something non-physical, in this life and in the hereafter. So it goes back to this rule, al-jaza' min jins al-amal. You do something for the sake of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you from the same sort of action that you did. يفسح الله لكم وإذا قيل انشزوا, just going by what is mentioned here, وإذا قيل انشزوا, if you are told, وإذا قيل, told انشزوا, what is انشزوا means? أي ارتفعوا وتنحوا عن مجالسكم لحاجة تعرض. And nushuz is when something is goes outside of something that is the norm, like المرأة الناشز when she disobeys her husband. So the norm is that she's obedient to her husband, she's kind to him and things like this. So she disobey him for no reason whatsoever, so she's sticking out of the norm. So إذا قيل انشزوا, that means ارتفعوا, rise up. You're sitting in a place and you are told to get up. Sometimes you have to get up to move forward, right? So if you are told to do so, saying, I'm not going to get up, what is this? If you're told something like this, be at ease. إذا قيل انشزوا أي ارتفعوا. So this is the meaning. ارتفعوا, rise up. وتنحوا, and move from your مجلس. وتنحوا عن مجالسكم لحاجة تعرض. If there is a need, if there's something happened. Say for example in the masjid, I'm just, something come up like the janazah is coming. They're carrying the janazah forward. Move from the place. No, I'm not going to move from my place. No, move from your place. Be nice and be kind and move from your place because there's a need. There's a need for it, not for someone to take your place. As we said, this is not permissible. So move your place so that that person sit in your place. No, that's not permissible unless there's a need for it. For example, if the Khalifa comes in, the president comes in, among the Muslimin, he comes in. Yes, the Amir comes in. This is something that the adab to be observed in different situations, of course, even though he would be not wanting to be in that state. But the people out of their goodness, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, he would not sit in a place where someone would get up for him to sit. If he wants to honor him, he's a great companion of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he would refuse because of this. So some of these things, it goes both ways. You understand what I'm saying? Is like, for example, let me just explain this for a little bit. You have, and these manners sometimes it's lost in different cultures, but this is part of our deen. You see someone carrying a heavy load. What should you do? You should go try to help him. This is obvious. The one that is carrying should not say, yes, go ahead. He should refuse, right? He should say, no, I'm okay. Jazakumullah khairan, barakallahu feek. This is the first instant that should be there. And if the other side insists, and he should insist, someone has to win at the end. And we talked about that in many. If you see that this is really something that will bring ease to him, maybe in some situations, that should be you're giving your brother the opportunity to help you, right? And at the same time, he should also understand that maybe he doesn't want to do this. Once he sees it, that he's very clear that he doesn't want to, in a nice way, then he would let it go. Sometimes people know this is not clear. If he tells me no, then it's no. Things doesn't work that way all the time. The same thing when you're a guest and someone offer you food, you should not say yes, sure. Yes, you should. No problem, of course, with this. Someone is offering something, you should kind of give him the space. Right? This is also part of the space. Sometimes out of the goodness of the person, he wants to be generous, but it's going to make it difficult for himself. Not to think always that way, but to give the space for your brother that if he offered something that he can take it back. So if he insists, that means he's sincere in this, then maybe you can go forward for it. And this is something to also increase the awareness of the person of the other side, this concern that people should have towards one another, not the greed that where is my benefit in all of this. So إذا قيل انشزوا, especially when people are together, Shaitan is where he's not relaxing, he's not somewhere else. No, he is with them to do what? To cause enmity and to cause harm with whatever means he can. In the salah, before the salah, after the salah. So when they know that the Shaitan is doing this, and where is he specifically? In the most virtuous places, in the masajid, in the houses of Allah. He's not in the bars or the places where people are committing sins. No, he's already taking care of this. He's there in the masajid, making sure that they will cause any harm or enmity. So, وَإِذَا قِيلَ انشُزُوا, if you are told to remove or to rise up and to move from your place, فَانشُزُوا. That means immediately do it. فَبَادِرُوا. That's why the fa here, فَانشُزُوا, that means do it right away. فَبَادِرُوا لِلْقِيَامِ لِتَحْصِيلِ تِلْكَ الْمَصْلَحَةِ, to attain this virtue or this benefit. فإن القيام بمثل هذه الأمور من العلم والإيمان. To observe these matters, and these matters is from ilm and iman. From al-iman, from faith, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. And from the ilm, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said afterwards, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises those who believe among you and those who are upon the ilm, and those who are given the ilm, darajat, and levels from His mercy subhanahu wa ta'ala. والله تعالى يرفع أهل العلم والإيمان درجات. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates the people of knowledge and the people of al-iman darajat, levels, بحسب ما خصهم الله به من العلم والإيمان. What is the levels? Who get more level than the other is according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose them with al-ilm wal-iman. So the more the person is upon al-iman, the more his iman is stronger, the more he is elevated. The more he increases his knowledge, the more he's elevated. The knowledge that he would act upon. So al-ilm wal-iman as it's mentioned in the verse. Wallahu bima ta'maluna khabir. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with what you do, khabir, well acquainted of what you're doing and what's in your heart and what your intentions. And sometimes a person might even leave something that he has the right to it, but to avoid enmity, to avoid hard feelings, he might leave something that he has the right to it. Life is not about rights. If you live this life based on your rights only, you won't have a goodly life. One of the example is those who are closer to you, especially the closest ones to oneself, a husband and wife. If they all live with what's rights, my right versus your right, they'll end up divorce. Allahu a'lam. So there's something extra more than the rights. وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Live with them with goodness, not live with them with fulfilling rights. This is the foundation, yes. And usually, as the ulama, they say, they refer to the rights when there is a dispute. So then we refer to the rights because this is what brings them together. Then you build with it with matters of goodness. The same thing with people that are together, people praying together, people upon the deen together. They would make sure that they would push away anything that will cause any enmity and any harm. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is clear in this: لا تباغضوا لا تدابروا. Do not tabaghadu does not mean do not hate one another. It means do not take the steps or the means that would make you hate one another. So by following the way of the Prophet ﷺ, and one of which is this: وإذا قيل انشزوا فانشزوا يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات, which shows also the fadila or the virtue more of the ilm, of the matters of ilm and the people of knowledge, in which they apply the knowledge to increase their iman, and also the people of ilm wal iman. And he says, والله بما تعملون خبير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is khabir, well acquainted. فيجازي كل عامل بعمله. He knows best subhanahu wa ta'ala who to give rewards to who the best. In khayran fa khayr, in sharran fa shar. If it's good, he's given good. If it's evil, it's evil. He says, وفي هذه الآية, in this ayah, فضيلة العلم, the virtue of al-ilm or knowledge. وأن زينته وثمرته التأدب بأدابه والعمل بمقتضاه. That from the zina, the adornment, the fruit of the ilm, what appears from the person of knowledge is التأدب بأدابه, to be upon the manners of ilm, and to act والعمل بمقتضاه, to act upon what the ilm says. What is the ilm? What is the meaning of ilm? Knowledge. Person have the knowledge of something, he keeps it in himself, he only teaches it to others. This is a goodness that a person would do. He's extending this knowledge to others, but that's not the fruit of the ilm. The objective of the ilm is for the person to act upon it himself first and foremost. And إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء. Those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ulama. So every time a person, even something in this ayah that we learned, it's supposed to show in our conduct and our actions, and not to say, but this case is this and this. Many times we go to the exceptions and we forget the norm. The norm is what, and the exceptions has its rulings. Yes, everything has an exception. But why do we go first to the exceptions and we consider everything is exceptions? Like al-ghiba, for example, backbiting. Some people, they learn the exceptions of al-ghiba before they know the ruling of al-ghiba. Yes, in some cases that you can make ghiba, meaning mentioning someone with something that he dislikes in his absence. If someone is coming forward, wants to get married to someone, and you know that something bad quality in that person, you should say it, right? But this is an exception. That's not the norm. Warning people against someone that is deviant. Yes, becomes even an obligation, but that's not the original ruling. The original ruling is that the Muslim has hurma, and have honor and dignity. And when a person comes forward to this, if he has to backbite someone, then it's not ghiba, because there is a need, a religious duty here that requires ilm, and requires for the heart that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in the heart. If he's doing that for the sake of Allah, for the sake of the deen, based on the ilm, based on knowledge, or he's doing that to fulfill some desire in himself, and he says, well, that's an excuse. Allah wallahu bima ta'maluna khabir. Allah knows exactly what's in the hearts of the people. And to know from, when we know the norm is that this is a hufra min hufar al-nar. This is a pit of the hellfire. To talk about someone behind his back. This is one of the holes of the hellfire, as they call it. And it's a major sin. When a person knows this, then he's not going to be at ease when he goes to the exception. So if it's an exception, he has to make sure that to himself, as if he's in the level of saying, Wallahi alladhi la ilaha illahu, this is permissible, this is needed, because it has to be, because there are certain rules that applies to this, but not to be at ease. You understand the point here? It's not to deny that there's exceptions, but to make sure that we save ourselves and to warn ourselves with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned us of, especially when it comes to these rights of others. So, of course, the ayah, when is shuru? We already passed the time. طيب, but this ayah requires definitely يعني, more attention, and maybe this can be a separate lecture when it comes to this and the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, and many different principles, one of which is فَافْسَحُوا يَفْسَحِ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. This subject of the reward is given from the same sort of deed. مَنْ سَتَرَ مُسْلِمًا سَتَرَهُ اللَّهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Whoever covers a Muslim, whether it's his faults or physically, by shelter, clothing, things like this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cover his faults, will also cover him in this dunya and in the hereafter. And the same, the opposite, من فضح مسلما, whoever exposes a Muslim, فضحه الله ولو في جوف بيته, as the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, whoever exposes a Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose him even in the most private place of his house. When he's trying to hide so much, it will be exposed. So, والله في عون العبد ما كان العبد في عون أخيه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the help of al-abd, the slave of Allah, as long as the abd is fi awni akhi, as long as the person is in the help of his brothers. So you want to keep the help from Allah, then help others. You want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy upon you, have mercy upon others. من لا يرحم لا يرحم, as the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام said. So anything that comes to the relationship, to make it as a rule, because there's so many ahadith in this. This is a huge subject in matters of deen. If a person wants to see how things are, see the relationship between the person and others, whatever he does to people, then he would get that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is how it works. So if he wants to be unjust, then expect to be treated. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most just. That means the justice of Allah is for the person to be punished, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive. But this is how a person would judge his actions, how he is to people. Does he love for people what he love for himself? ألا تحبون أن يغفر الله لكم, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, if to forgive and to pardon. No, I would never forgive him. MashaAllah. You don't want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you? So you want to be treated the same way, treat people the same way. And sometimes if you forgive someone, this is not the right decision, because you would create more evil on the face of earth. You know, someone that is a criminal, oh, he likes that. So things are not just one thing and one thing only, but the norm is that a Muslim forgive and he has mercy upon others and he is kind to others, have the concern to others. All of these things done by the heart and physically, then the reward is given from the same sort of deed. If it's tied for oneself, rizq wise, provision, spend. ومن قدر عليه رزقه فلينفق مما آتاه الله. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if it's tight on you, spend from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you, the obligatory spending, or you need something, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for your brother, and so on. So this is a huge principle. And with regards to adab al-majlis, manners of the masjid that needs to be observed, and other things, there are so many different narrations and different hadith, and the rulings of being in the first saf, what's the ithar and what's not. You don't make ithar, but at the same time you make space for others. So if you come early and you're in the first row, and someone comes late and he wants that, to be in the first row, can he remove someone and he says, no, this is my spot because I prayed there Fajr yesterday? Of course not. And if someone comes and says this, no, I'm not going to leave my spot, in a nice way. But if it's going to cause a fight, maybe in some situation, you might leave it for a reason so that it does not cause enmity. But that at the same time, that person might take advantage of it. But the point here, someone comes, normally this doesn't happen. But someone wants to find a space. If there's a space, yes, people should give space for others. Not to make it harmful for themselves, which they would stand like that in the saf, or not observe the sunnah in standing in the saf. But oftentimes you would find people are standing like this in spaces, and they don't want to give even a room for anyone. If we follow the sunnah, everybody will be happy. Shoulder to shoulder, and the foot is not expanded like that or big space, just the normal standing of a person, and the whole body next to the whole body with softness, without tightness. As the Prophet ﷺ would say, "Leenu fi aydi ikhwanikum," be soft in the hands of your brother when you're standing in the saf. So when everybody's touching one another from the shoulder down in a soft way, then everybody will have a space for them to make room in the salah. So inshallah, we'll talk about more of these matters. But because of the time, we'll stop here and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who observe what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands them to be upon. But again, we're going through what's been read in the tafsir, inshallah, so that we are studying that, inshallah. There's a attendance code, inshallah. Okay, make room, comma is mandatory. Okay, make room, earn spaciousness. So you have to know how to spell things now, mashallah. Even though they say that the spelling is not that important, but do it right, inshallah. Making room, M-A-K-I-N-G, room, earn, E-A-R-N, spaciousness, S-P-A-C-I-O-U-S-N-E-S-S. If there's a misspelling, it's okay, inshallah. Make room, earn spaciousness. The question here with an example of الجزاء من جنس العمل is like if the slave lowers his gaze and doesn't look at haram, Allah will increase him in basira, mashallah. And how Allah mentions in Surah Al-A'la, how Allah says they will neither live or die. They get punished like this because in the dunya they were alive, but their heart was dead, so they get the same type of jaza. Is this how jaza works? What's the ayah in Surah Al-A'la? But first, the al-jaza min jins al-amal. Yes, this is something that it's a room for people to reflect upon, not to make tafsir or to make rulings without knowledge. But this is a person, sometimes the more a person lives, sometimes he sees the effect of his actions later, after 20 years, after 30 years. That's why we have to constantly repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yes, any time a person, especially with the ones that requires lots of struggle against one's desire. So the example mentioned, if someone lower his gaze for the sake of Allah, even though there's some narrations about he would find the halawa, the sweetness of it in his heart at the day of judgment. So there's a reward in this life and in the hereafter. And one of which is even his relationship with his wife, for example, will be stronger if he lower his gaze for the sake of Allah. Or if he's not married, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for him. He should not be in haste of fulfilling his desire in a haram way, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reward him by something that he will be pleased with in this life and in the hereafter. And he will it will increase his basira, this is for sure. His ability to see things in the right way and form. And some of the things is like a person is seeking riba, haram, so that he can have money and spaciousness and so on. He's treated in the opposite way of his intentions. And he become the worst in his decisions, and he's not able to do things as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ الرِّبَا لَا يَقُومُونَ إِلَّا كَمَا يَقُومُ الَّذِي يَتَخَبَّطُهُ الشَّيْطَانُ مِنَ الْمَسِّ. Whether this is in the hereafter or some said in this dunya, as if they are beaten with the shaitan. Shaitan is beating them. It means they're as if they're possessed by the shayateen. They're not able to see what is right and what is wrong. So yes, this is something that can be applied in many different ways. The ayah is ثُمَّ لَا يَمُوتُ فِيهَا وَلَا يَحْيَى. In the hellfire, this is the punishment. There is no death or life for that person in the hereafter in the hellfire, because he is in the hellfire forever. He tastes death with every moment of punishment, but he's not dying because of the punishment is forever, an everlasting one. And the heart was dead. This is a normal thing, yes. Those who their hearts were dead in this life, dead without al-iman, because al-iman is the life of this heart, then they would receive the punishment accordingly in the hereafter. No, no musta'an. Well, one last question here. Evidence can be used to explain the wiping over cotton or modern material socks. Yes, but this is again, to make it clear, this is a valid differences of opinions when it comes to the cloth, the socks made of cloth. And those who said that it's permissible, like in the Madhab of Imam Ahmad and others, because there's no difference between, or the Sharia did not make difference between leather and cloth in any rulings. So why there is a difference is there. As long as it all the different ahkam or the rulings or the conditions applies to it, wearing it in state of wudu and it stays firm and one's foot does not fall, and a person can walk in it and things like this. So so the evidence is that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ wiping over al-khuffayn, this is mutawatir, of course, consensus among the ummah, and they differed among themselves with regards to al-khuffayn. Is it only the leather or also includes the ones with the socks? And there's a hadith reported by 9 of the companions radiallahu anhum that the Prophet ﷺ, or so that the Prophet ﷺ would wipe over al-alayni wal-jawrabayn, that he would wipe over the shoes and the jawrabayn. So something else is mentioned. Al-jawrab is usually something that is made of socks or made of cloth. And they used to have something called a tasakhin where they warm their foot and they would wipe over it also. So the matter is easy, inshallah ta'ala. But not, again, not to treat it as this is haqq and the other thing is batil, because the other one they have the subject of maybe the majority are upon this, Allah knows best. So this is, something to be considered, inshallah ta'ala. Allah. Anything else, inshallah? Inshallah, when we talk about in matters of fiqh, when someone studies fiqh, it should be studied from the way that the ulama have been studying it from one generation to the other, which is according to a madhab, and it's with dabt, well established, not just, that a person on his own self learning. And for many great reason and wisdom behind it, but it's very important for us. And of course, not to be blindly followers, but rather, where do we get our deen? From the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Person doesn't understand the language properly. Person doesn't understand all of the different ayat and the hadith and the rules and the principles of matters of extracting rulings. There's a huge knowledge with matters of usul fiqh and others and language and how they use the general meanings versus what is specific. So many different ways that nowadays when people are lacking all of this and they want to just to refer to hadith and says this is the evidence of it. It doesn't work that way. And it would never work that way, but rather to follow the principles that the ummah has been upon. But in the heart, a person wants to follow the way the Prophet ﷺ, and once it becomes clear, and that's why the people of knowledge, they have a huge responsibility of making sure that yes, it's to teach and to be upon what to them is the way of the Prophet ﷺ with whatever principles of the madhab that they're upon. وصلى الله وسلم على محمد وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.